It looks like everyone's okay with this, so here we are. We're going to get going. So I'm going to introduce to you right now the President and CEO of the American Composers Forum, uh, Vanessa Rhodes, and she's going to give a little bit of background on ACF and the ACF Connect program. So please welcome Vanessa Rhodes.
Thank you, Dameun. Great intro. Thank you. Um, Pleasure to see you all here today. We are ACF, American Composers Forum, is an organization based in Minnesota that serves the nation, the US and its territories, and the sovereign native lands. And we are an organization that supports and advocates for composers and music creators around the country who are alive. And so we do this through various things, through services, through resources. We have a help desk that you can visit if you have any questions, if you want to work with a composer, if you are a composer and have questions and need connections. And then we do it through advocacy, through end of our recording label, as well as I Care If You Listen, our multimedia hub, and generally advocating on behalf of artists everywhere to be included, valued, and commissioned. So we created ACF Connect a few years ago, and some of the important aspects of this program are that we really wanted to create a very sustained avenue of support, so that it wasn't just a one-off commission. It was about relationships, both between the composers who were being commissioned and the ensemble performers who were working with them, as well as with ACF and the performing ensemble, as well as others who maybe were identified through the process that were not receiving the commission, but could be potentially a relationship to build on later on. It was actually more than 2 years ago that we initiated this with the AACM, the Association for the Advancement of Creative Musicians. And we supported everything from the call for applications and deciphering which 3 artists they wanted to work with, commissions itself, creating the space for a workshop already now in 2019, September 2019, here in Minnesota. There will be a subsequent workshopping period, as well as, of course, the premieres of these pieces, and then all the back and forth in between ACF administration, the AACM administration, the composers, artists with each other. So I can say this was definitely, we had no idea what to expect when we started along this road between the pandemic and everything else that has happened from the initial contact point for this partnership. So we're very grateful to be in collaboration with these amazing artists. I'm very, very happy to be able to introduce you to 2 of them today, and that we have been part of this extraordinary time with the AACM as well, and look forward to continuing to build on that relationship. I really want to thank our donors, the ACF Connect campaign. They are listed on the website. If you look at this event, as well as other web pages, you'll find their names. They have been really incredible in creating a pathway of support for us to be able to plan future cycles from the beginning of this program in an ongoing effort. We also obviously want to thank our panelists here today, and I know Dameun's going to introduce both of you, so I will turn it back to Dameun and thank all of you visiting with us today, as well as those watching later, and look forward to the conversation. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Vanessa. Um, so I will take this time to introduce our panelists. We'll start off with our 2019-2020 ACF Connect recipient. Alto saxophonist Rudresh Mahanthappa is widely known as one of the premier voices in jazz of the 21st century. He has over 16 albums to his credit. His most recent is Hero Trio. Rudresh has won numerous Downbeat magazine critic polls and received both the Guggenheim Fellowship and the Doris Duke Performing Arts Awards, among others. He is currently the Anthony H.P. Lee 79 Director of Jazz at Princeton University. Um, and also joining us today is Renee Baker. Renee Baker is founding music director and conductor of the internationally acclaimed Chicago Modern Orchestra Project, CMOP, a polystylistic orchestral organization that grew from the plums of classical music as well as jazz. A visual artist, film artist, composer, and recontextualese, Ms. Baker is a true engineer of multidisciplines, layering movement, film projections of real and imagined things. She creates an exquisite film arena of surrealistic activity within a sonic theater. Her compositions are crafted of her many talents with carefully constructed environments that also allow interdeterminacy or indeterminacy, experimentalism, classicism, subjectivity, and object interpretations to coexist. Intense but rewarding for both performer and listener viewer, all parties are cast into unknown roles upon encounter to be radically inside a temporary environment of limitless inhabitation. Ms. Baker is a member of the world-renowned collective AACM, Association of Advancement of Creative Musicians, which we'll talk about today. Um, and critical acclaim for her graphic score novels has come from performances in Berlin, Poland, London, Scotland, and as far reaching as Vietnam. So I want to welcome our panelists, our esteemed panelists, to the conversation today. So I think we'll just, just get it started. Rudresh, you were selected for the ACF Connect program. And I was fortunate enough to see the performance in September of 2019 with the great Black Music Ensemble at the Cedar Cultural Center here in St. Paul, where you and fellow creators, the Honorable Elizabeth A. Baker and Ade Steve Colson, performed with the ensemble. And this was a culmination of a week-long workshop that you did with the ensemble. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that experience and maybe how that time with the ensemble sort of inspired or impacted your creation of this piece.
Well, I'm very familiar with AACM and the history of AACM, and several artists from the collective have been highly influential. I wasn't so familiar with its current iteration in Chicago. I lived in Chicago in the mid '90s, so I knew some of what was happening, but I wasn't familiar with kind of the direction and the vibe of where things were at in more recent years. So it was really valuable to have that week with the Great Black Music Ensemble to not only to try some things out, but just to see where they're at, what their priorities are musically and artistically, and what their comfort zones are, what ways in which they like to be challenged, and what ways maybe they don't like to be challenged, and right for that. I always think that the best scenario is if you're writing to highlight what people do, but also hopefully challenging them in positive ways. I think that that's a way in which I think that commissioning is really a productive process that kind of not only advances everyone's individual artistic trajectories, but just kind of propels the art form forward. Mm-hmm. So so the performance you saw was really just kind of a bonus thing. They were Great Black Music Ensemble was had scheduled that concert to coincide with this week-long workshop, and we were just lucky enough to be invited to kind of join in, but that was very valuable too, and not only just kind of working with the group all week, but to be kind of a part of a live performance and just and bask in that sort of energy was really inspirational. As far as, well, it was inspirational on its own, but it also was good fuel for what I thought could manifest at in performance from a compositional perspective. So so that was really fun, and it was also fun just to see what the other composers were thinking about. I mean, in another conversation that you and I and Renee had, we were talking about how all three of us are very, very different, and to see what Ade and Elizabeth were were thinking about was just as inspirational as working with the group alone. And I was really also happy to see that, that Great Black Music Ensemble is made up of, some of these stalwart figures like Ernest Dawkins, but also a bunch of young folks, who are 19, 20, 21 years old, and who are kind of not only carrying the mantle of the mission and message of AACM, but maybe are coming from different experiences as far as music and music education, and seeing where all of that collides was really beneficial too. And and just seeing what all can be embraced. And obviously, this is only one piece, so I didn't want to throw in the kitchen sink, but I feel like I have 8 other ideas for 8 other pieces that I could write for the group that would be just as interesting and all unique.
That's great. Well, I want to come back to that point in a minute, but Renee, you have been a part of AACM for quite a while, so you've seen sort of an evolution of the ensemble, or different stages of the ensemble. And I think one of the things that maybe didn't come up in our last conversation was that intergenerational aspect of the work. I wonder if you can talk about that a little bit, about the importance of having that connection between generations in AACM.
Well, yeah, the ensemble itself is an icon, but the icon consists of the skill sets of everybody that comes to the AACM. So the spirit of what everybody brings is what really shapes every performance, from performance to performance. Again, I sometimes joke about, I wonder why they let me in, because I come from an exclusively classical background. So leaving the left foot in classical and putting the right foot on what we can term the dark side, I had a lot to learn and a lot to embrace. But in that process, I got a chance to use the Great Black Music Ensemble, as well as other peripheral members, as a laboratory for developing my vocabulary and vernacular, not only as a composer, but as a conductor. So coming from a strictly classical background in conducting also, I got forced to embrace many systems, Butch Morris's, Walter Thompson's, John Zorn's, and I actually went back to school to develop a gestural conducting language that I call CCL, Cipher Conduit Linguistics. And it enables me to actually marry classical licks, jazz, creative, new music, pop, gospel, opera. It allows me to put all of those influences together. The AACM has been marvelous in taking that journey with me, because I was kind of the odd sister out. But what the ensemble is capable of is amazing, because it's not just a musical connection. It is a spiritual connection. And when you come to the AACM, it's not just about your skill set. It's about the other person's skill set. It's about the spirit of the music. Great Black music, ancient to the future. So I'm thigh deep in it. And so anytime that I work with the Great Black Music Ensemble, I want the audience and the players and anyone who's listening to come away with a spiritual experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and that shift that you mentioned, and that journey. Also, this represents that broad, beautiful, vibrant spectrum of great Black music, right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And so, thinking of that sort of spirituality and those connections, Rudresh, So that time that you spent, the 3 days that you spent workshopping, you know, you said it was inspiring to work with the ensemble and also see what the conductor of the other music creators were doing. Um, I wonder those initial inspirations. I think you talked about this piece that you were writing, inspired by that interaction with the ensemble, but you know you shifted to this new piece that you ended up submitting to the ensemble. It's very different than the first piece you were writing. I wonder if you could speak to sort of your reasonings for making that shift, um, and and why you thought it was necessary to do something different.
Well, I think the constructive elements of what I was writing before, are kind of similar. I mean, I wanted to it for me it made the most sense to write something that was essentially modular, that would be, I think what I was initially working on was something that was more groove based, where there were several grooves that could happen and several melodies that could happen that were all sort of interchangeable in a way, and the layering of those would create a different effect. Um, and the thing that I like about that too is obviously it can be conducted. And I had to say that Renee, initially we were all under the impression that we were going to be conducting our own pieces. So
Oh, I
I'm
know.
actually glad that you're here to do
Thank you.
it.
Thank you.
But what I like about this piece and what I ended up submitting and the ideas I had before was, there's a certain amount of autonomy. I mean, these snippets, these grooves, whatever, they can be, they can be cued by a conductor, but also an individual musician can make a decision to go to a different part of the piece, and others can follow or not follow. Like I remember hearing about this large scale Cecil Taylor piece, that someone described to me as like, it was almost like a society or a small civilization with different factions, and
Mhm.
it was almost set up in a way where certain factions could get trampled by others in a way that happens in, in real life and in society. And I thought that was so amazing to actually write a piece where something not being heard is actually part of the piece, something being drowned out as part of the piece. And that really struck me. I remember, somebody told me about that, I don't know, 25 years ago, and it's always kind of been looming in the back of my mind as a way to think about putting together music. So that initial piece seemed fine, and I think I was very late, and I actually missed the deadline to submit the piece, and then the George Floyd tragedy happened, and the George Floyd crime, I should say, happened, and I had no intention of writing a piece, for George Floyd or his family. I mean, I think that's a massive undertaking, and it's too fresh. That just doesn't make sense to me. I mean, it's odd to me when somebody says they're writing music for George Floyd. I just think it's too heavy a subject to tackle. But what I wanted to actually highlight was the reaction. What does it mean to be an activist? What does it mean to stand up? And who feels empowered to do that, and who feels unempowered to do that, and why? So 8:46 became a sort of battle cry, 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And so being kind of a math head that I am, I like looking at numbers and intervals, and 8, 4, and 6 kind of end up creating this sort of whole tone sound if you look at those intervals, which I like the fact that whole tone is simultaneously haunting and ambiguous, and in that, it has this kind of moving tonal center or no tonal center, depending on how you think about it. So all these this modular piece that I wrote, all the modules are somehow related to 8, 4, and 6, either very literally or some expansion upon those intervals. And to me, it was a way of looking at. So everyone was kind of running with this idea that people were having die-ins, and laying down in the street for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And it made me think about the power of that. And it also made me think about and question the motivations behind that. What are the motivations of activism? Are people really in it for the long haul, or are they in it just because their friends are doing it? And Dameun, we talked we talked about almost like the corporatization of activism the other day. Amazon having a banner that says Black Lives Matter, and then trying to sell me coffee beans right below that. Like, I don't know if does that mean
they weren't the
anything?
only one.
Does that have impact? Is that
Mhm.
and Amazon was just one of many that
Yes.
and every CEO in the world had to issue. I mean, I don't need a letter from the CEO of Uber telling me what they think about George Floyd. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
what purpose that's serving. So I guess this piece was a very small way of asking some questions about what activism is, and who's allowed to be an activist, and who feels unempowered, and are the unempowered actually empowered? Is it someone can be an activist from their couch as much as they can be an activist in the street? And I think it's worth understanding it's worth maybe acknowledging that, and trying to think about to what degree can we take action even when we think we can't. So I'm not proposing any solutions. It's just it's more to instigate a conversation and ask some questions, and that's kind of was the motivation of the piece.
But I mean, it's interesting that you brought up the Cecil Taylor piece, and how the themes played with one another, and the idea of trampled voices, and I think what you were talking about sometimes in that sort of the more performative aspects of activism. Sometimes the voices that are getting trampled are the voices that we need to hear the most from, and the noise is being created by maybe larger institutions who may have suspect motivations, if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea. So thinking about how you constructed this piece, being inspired by the idea of questioning or exploring activism in our world today, in our global world. I know from being a big fan of Renee over time that you're very outspoken, and I know a lot about your own activism.
But I'm being good right now.
You are being good.
I'm behaving.
Well, I mean, but there is a such thing as good trouble too, right? So I'm not saying that your activism is bad. You're good trouble.
Yeah.
You're doing the good trouble. but you have this background, and you have this understanding, and you're an activist in the field and beyond. So I wonder sort of what kind of planning and thinking goes into preparing, given Rudresh's explanation of the piece, how does one translate that to the ensemble, this very diverse ensemble?
Yeah, very easily. So the conversation that we had on Monday, whether it took the direction you wanted it to or not, was very helpful for me, because as a conductor, no matter whose piece I'm looking at, my job is to be sure that we start together, end together, and that we, in some way, give a composite idea of what the piece is about to the audience. So I did a lot of thinking even since Monday, because I see George Floyd in every Black person in this country. And so in bringing honor to his life, I really back up when I have to think about which portions of an event I'm going to celebrate or highlight. So I thought about what George Floyd's death meant to me as an individual. And every man, every boy, every woman, every Black person in this country could have been George Floyd. So in exploring how to make this arena happen sonically. As Rudresh and I spoke already about, there's a very sobering idea at the beginning that kind of will lead into the the polyphony, the modules, the personalities of all Black people in this country, because we're not alike, right? So the freedom that Rudresh has mentioned in regards to voices being heard, certain things being more important, some things not being heard, some things being trampled, all of this imagery is what was inherent in that George Floyd episode. And that's what the Great Black Music Ensemble is going to put flesh on, that idea. That, and unfortunately, for whomever, I will not be concentrating on the knee. I will be concentrating on the condition of Black people in this country through these voices in the module, knowing that we still don't have answers to this kind of trauma. So again, we will resolve, but we won't resolve. But we will leave, hopefully, the audience and listeners and viewers with the idea that with enough work, with enough conversation, which is what's happening in these modules, there are conversations happening all over the place. Slow conversations, fast conversations, loud, soft. And unless we have the conversations, we're never going to get to the other side of this. So this is what I took from our conversation on Monday. Also, there's a piece that really reminded me of all of the aspects of what we talked about on Monday. And it's Luciano Berrio's Passaggio. So it is a piece where there are voices layered, there's yelling, there's exclaiming, there's humming, there's sighing, there's crying, there's wailing, there's moaning. There's all the characteristics inherent in living life in this country as a Black person. Even those of us that have become civilized still have to deal with the vagaries of the possibilities of what could happen to one of us or one of our family members or a friend. So the piece is perfect for this time. And I'm thrilled to be able to be asked by the AACM to direct it, because it's personal. It's personal for each of us, because what happened to George Floyd has and will continue to change history. So that's what I'm focusing on.
That last point I think is really important, and sort of points to where we are now. We're coming up on the anniversary, the year anniversary, in a few days of the murder of George Floyd, and that happened in the midst of this global pandemic, which showed, I think, how connected we truly are, and how much we need each other to make sure that we all are, globally, that we're all are safe. And so I wonder, Rudresh, in sort of creating these modules, each module, I think, as Renee was mentioning, has its own sort of
has a personality.
Yeah, personality to it. I wonder if there, what were some strong intentions around the personalities of the modules that maybe that you could speak to, or you did want to have this whole spectrum of like somber to very lively, but I wonder like what other kind of thoughts went into creating some of the modules.
Actually, that it's funny because that actually bounced back to thinking about my work directly with the group. Spending that much time, it was a blessing to be able to spend that much time with the group before writing, I have to say. And I didn't get to know all of them incredibly well, but I got a good sense of where they were coming from musically and kind of what their inclinations were. And so I was thinking a lot about what they might like to play and what feels comfortable for them to play, and, like we were, when we were talking the other day, I mean, there were some things where Alexis is this great young pianist who's, I don't know, maybe she's still in or undergrad. I think she's around 20 years old or something, and just amazing chops and ability. And there were just some things that I knew. I was like, yeah, Alexis might be the only person who can play this, and that's good. That'll be great. There's only one person that can play this line, and that would be just fine if that's only played by one person and if it's played by her. There's a trumpet player whose name is escaping me right now, but he also is an electronic musician as well. And
Ben Lamar.
Yeah, he is great. And a couple of the modules were written with him in mind, and not necessarily to play on trumpet, but to
right,
do something synthetic with. So so that I think the writing of the exact of beyond kind of a sketch of temperament, the details of writing the modules came more out of my interactions with each individual musician.
Right.
And some of the things I can just hear Dee singing. I mean, Dee is awesome. Like I can really hear her bringing life to a bunch of them. Actually, a good half of them are going to sound great with Dee singing them. Really, so
yeah. So, but really, that time with the ensemble, you were speaking to that being a unique experience. That I'm sure that Billy Lackey is our VP of Artist Services, and he kind of runs the program. And thinking about our conversations that he and I have had about this program, it seems that was a huge benefit to being able to create this piece specifically for this ensemble. But kind of a unique experience. Is that right? To have that much time with the
to have that much time, and especially with a large group with that many different musical personalities, I think it would have been hard to write for them with, I don't know, it wouldn't have been the same. It wouldn't have been as personal, I mean, I feel like, I mean, the way I've always written for my groups, I'm always writing for individuals. I'm not writing for an instrumentation, kind of in the same way Duke Ellington wrote Johnny Hodges on the lead alto part and didn't write alto 1. He wrote Johnny. That's how I'm always thinking about how I write. I always think of, choosing your band is half the battle with writing, especially if you're writing for your own groups. You know what I mean? So to be able to carry that forward in being commissioned to write for something that I'm probably not going to play on. That was the other thing that Renee had to talk about. There was some talk as to whether we were actually going to play or whether we were just going to hang. But either way,
I'm assuming that you were at least going to solo.
Okay, I'll bring my horn. I'll bring a reed.
Oh, well, you can blow it, you can chew on it, but I expected to see you on the stage.
Okay, I'll be there
with the ensemble.
Okay.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right.
I think it came from me watching your videos, and I got hip to how you write. So there's going to be. It's just going to be a blast between you and the ensemble, because I know how to make space. And so I know from listening to your music that you got no shortage of stuff to say.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So it's going to be absolutely, you are expected.
Great. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and Renee, when we first, when we were talking about this piece before, you were kind of excited to conduct it because you kind of looked at it like some of your film score and conducting, and how you approach conducting for that. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how you approach that and what made you think that would be the approach for this piece.
Mostly because when I'm looking at any kind of piece, whether I'm writing a symphony, an opera, a film score, a sonata, my aim is always to create an arc, set the listener up, a beginning, a middle, and an end, but often the end is an unexpected ending. So you don't want to always be predictable toward the end. But once we talked on Monday, I understand that this is very similar in how I do film scores, because I'm setting these modules, these small groups of clips on a timeline. Okay, and so, but in between those timelines, there may be some improvisation, then another module, but it's linear because whoever's looking at the film needs to see where the music is going. So, I think of music conceptually always as a journey. It's never, even when we practice, you're not going to drive to that destination 20 different ways. You need to pick one way and kind of get there. But the beauty of what we do and what the AACM does and what Rudresh does with his group is there's a map, but if the map says there's traffic over here, you're free to detour and try to shave a couple of minutes off that journey. So everything that the Great Black Music Ensemble does, and I'm so sorry, but you haven't met most of us. It's going to be a blast, though. And even though I wasn't involved in the Minneapolis project, I'm thrilled to be involved with bringing this piece to life. I really am. Because I've seen the Great Black Music Ensemble create magic and take audiences to places they don't expect to go. So I'm thrilled.
Well, I mean, with a piece like this, which is very exciting, like a lot of jazz and given the modules are, you mentioned a journey, and I think if this is any type of journey, it's kind of a choose your own adventure sort of thing. And no. She's gonna put on her conducting.
No, but with this kind of writing, if the composer is good about what I call the happy accident, very often you can get a piece that's better than what you actually wrote. I mean, that goes for all of us. So with this sort of iteration, I think Rudresh can attest, there's probably thousands of ways, if you lay the formula out, that this particular piece could be done. And that's smart writing. And because if you need to change things for another ensemble, maybe that's not as skilled with improvisation as the Great Black Music Ensemble, there's so much music in these bars alone. And honestly, I know my job is to get everybody trying to get to the end, but there's enough music on that first page and on that second page and on that third page that if you completely opened it up, you'd be there for hours.
Right, exactly. That's one of the things I like about writing this way too, is like, because we can play for 20 minutes and I think we could create a fulfilling experience, or we can play for 2 hours and have a fulfilling experience, I like that option.
When I bring in modular pieces, I put all this stuff on the stands and my musicians look at each other. We're not getting through all of this. We're not going to get anywhere near these pages, because often at the end of a first page of maybe 10 modules, we have to stop because the recording engineer says, we're out of space. Can you break? And then we just keep going. But often we never get through all of the music that's set out on a gig. So this is why when you and I were talking about what, I like your comment to me, I don't know what a true module is. That's what you wrote.
You were the one who said it, not me.
Yeah, I know, but I'm thinking about the physical thing so that people understand, and at least this group, hey, you see that module? Keep going. There's got to be a playing, a recapitulation, a development, a recapitulation, sit out, give me some space, a recapitulation. There's so much that can happen with modules like this. So I think the performance can't help but be a home run. Yeah. I don't aim for anything else.
I think it's going to be great. I think one of the things that I want to do, a few weeks before is just on my own, just kind of test out what some of the layering, just maybe if there's a template that we can start with and then kind of expand from there, like let's start with these 3 things happening at once, just more for everyone to get familiar with it sonically. And then I think that will make people feel empowered to kind of make their own decisions and build confidence. So,
and that was kind of what you mentioned in terms of like the questions that you wanted to ask during this piece, and maybe get answers. I don't know, maybe there won't be answers, but like that, like who gets empowered during these bouts of, I would say bouts of activism. Like whose voices get heard and who gets empowered, and so that's similar in sort of the choices that these the artists get to make in the piece, and maybe Renee as a conductor had a little bit of
a whole lot
in that, yeah, for sure. Now, the one thing that I didn't mention about this piece, although you might have figured it out, the audience, about this piece, because we keep calling it the piece.
It has no title.
It has no title. It did come with a kind of, maybe it was like a working title, but it doesn't have a title yet, and you're still kind of thinking about, or maybe it just won't have a title, right?
Yeah, it will.
It'll have a title. I mean, I think we all know. We all know about the inspiration and the backstory of its inspirations and motivations. So, trying to find the title that somehow concisely transmits that is not easy. But I'll give it some thought. I have some time this summer. I'll figure it out.
I'd be happy to brainstorm with you.
I would be happy to have you brainstorm.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to sort of think about before we maybe open it up to questions is, this piece, it does have a message and really strong influence, is very much of the now and what's going on in the world right now. And so I think my question for both you and Renee, Rudresh as a composer, and Renee as the conductor, is really what do you hope that the audience and the performers get out of this piece? The audience and listening to the piece and hearing the performance, and the performers and working on it and getting it ready to be performed. What do you hope that folks get out of this piece?
I mean, I want folks to think. I don't expect, like I said a couple of times, I'm not trying to get answers. I think now is the time to ask more questions than to actually
have the conversation.
Exactly. And people leaving a performance that makes people think, it has always been more important to me than a performance that quote unquote satisfies. You know what I mean? Like I want people to leave thinking, to leave with their mind expanded just a little bit as to what's possible, and or have a different perspective on something that they thought they already understood. That's always been my goal as a performer and composer. So this is just another extension of that, an example of that, I think.
Yeah, Dameun, when these kinds of experiences and pieces, it's precisely what Rudresh said. It is to start what I call creative conversation. So what I want when people leave, I want you to run home to Google or to a book or something, because there's something, hopefully in the program notes, there's going to be something that's going to raise questions for you. And that's what I'm hoping. So this movement of justice, this movement of activism never stops. There'll always be somebody that's an underdog that needs something addressed. The question that we have to ask, I'll just talk about America in particular, the question that we have to ask is, can we do better? So everything that we do, whether it's as a musician, a composer, a conductor, are we contributing to the creative conversation? Are we helping something to move forward? Which is why I say I'm very loath to celebrate trauma, but I can celebrate what can come next.
Right.
The possibilities, the infinite goodness that we have, but we choose to often not exercise. So with the Great Black Music Ensemble, we're talking about this. Music is the exquisite language. It's the exquisite language that allows anybody that can hear, or even if they can't, they can feel vibrations of, are we doing the best that we can as humans? And the fact is that this brings into question, did that have to happen? How can we be better as people? How can we be better to each other? When Monday happened, when we had our conversation, it ended well because we had the conversation. So that's our first step, is talking to each other and just trying to get into the meat, trying to understand what it is that we see in each other. And a little less about the differences, and find the meeting points. So I found that in the piece, which is why I asked what may have in any light seemed contentious questions. They're not. It's to get to the meat of the piece. Absolutely. And to be sure that I, as a director, can give that freedom and allow the players to have that creative conversation also.
Love that.
Awesome.
It seems to be a perfect piece for the times. And if Prince hadn't already stolen the title "Sign of the Times," then maybe that could have been the title of this piece. But I really do think it's an important message for this time, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing it. Having Renee, you conducted, and hearing Rudresh solo.
Absolutely.
given that task. But again, it's going to be a wonderful piece for where we are right now, and I hope that there are many questions to ask as we find our ways to move forward in this time. And it really does connect to the work that we're doing as an organization here at ACF. So I want to take the time to open up for any questions, if there are any. I didn't see any. Did I see any? No, I don't know. I don't think so right now. But if you do have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or drop it in the chat, and we'll get to those. We'll answer some of those questions as well.
Or if you have any answers, we'll take answers too.
Yes, answers too. anything you want to say at this moment. Stephen, Miles, on my board. You're muted.
I was trying to make sure I also had my video going. Hi. Love the conversation. Actually, I wrote down a question. This is for Renee. This was early on, and I'll tell you, my question was, it concerns your background, like, because you took the time to say, I come from a classical background. I'm kind of the odd person out with the AACM. Now you sound like you completely live in this world in terms of improvisation. And I'm
I live
very
in both.
interested. Okay, I'm interested in your journey from classical training into improvisation.
I'll tell you very, very quickly.
Okay.
It was Nicole Mitchell. I, for 10 years, was a contractor of the Joffrey Ballet Orchestra, and I needed to hire a flute player. I also was contracting the Center for Black Music Research ensemble. Coleridge Taylor Perkinson said to me, you know, I was at this event and I heard this flute player. I said, so? I said, can she read? He said,
read anything.
He said, Renee, for once, can you just do what I ask? I said, all right, I'll hire her. And we met, and instant friendship. 2 years after that, though, she contacted me and said, you know, I'm watching you in classical music, but you're pretty fearless. I think you'd be a candidate for the AACM. And you know what I said? I said, you mean those people who can't play classical? No. So I said, and I don't improvise. So she said, come coach with me. I went and coached with her for a summer before I joined her Black Earth Strings group. That was my first thing. But I tell you, every gig was like this. Everybody was playing, and Josh Abrams would say, go. Or Tamika Reed would say, go, it's your turn. You're messing up the form. I learned on the ground. And then going back to school, actually, to do my master's and my doctorate in music composition, because I knew if I was going to continue to craft not just classical symphonies, because I'd had a couple of symphonies premiered by the Chicago Sinfonietta, now I've got a whole nother demographic over here. So that was it. And I've enjoyed being under the mantle, under the permissions of the mantle of the AACM, to create a lot of stuff. Does that answer it?
That does, and I just want to link it with something that Rudresh, that you said. You said at one point that you really like you want to write for specific individuals. So putting together the band is maybe the biggest task for your kind of writing. And I love what you said, quoting about Ellington, writing for Johnny Hodges, not just alto one. And to me, that's a huge difference between the kinds of these different musical worlds. I mean, the abstraction, the emphasis in classical music on, you create this thing that anybody can repeat. And I think the music that you're describing in your own and the work is really about creating music, creating context in which people are invested, their individuality is invested, and this is not going to be repeated ever in exactly this way. It's a living thing this time.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you.
Great question.
And Renee, I just wanted to say that it makes perfect sense to me that you're part of AACM, because it's almost it's like it's the flow in the other direction of of some of the older folks like George Lewis and Muhal, and who maybe came out of improvisation and went into
it's a broadening.
Yeah. So it makes sense. It's not so nutso to me. Knowing the history of the AACM, it's not so nutso. It seems like it's perfectly fitting, really.
But it really added a huge dimension to me. Just say opera, for instance. I'm currently working on my 9th opera. They've all been produced, but opera in my early life would have been one thing. Opera with the absorption of other genres and other materials and other influences has become a whole nother vehicle, still able to be called opera and appreciated by people who love the traditional opera form. But being in the AACM gives me so much license to experiment. I still have to craft it.
Right.
But it's a great freedom. It's a great permission.
I think Carol Barnett If you want to ask your question. Oh, you're muted.
Unmuted myself. Okay, good. Early on, Renee, you said a phrase, those of us who have been civilized, and as I've listened to this, I'm assuming that that's sort of meaning what you just said, broadening your horizons and you know, doing the best you can. And I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that right.
I'm not sure of the context, but I think that we all have more in us than we ever venture to express, because we often feel that we need permissions just from society or just from yourself. Every day I hear people say, "Oh, I wish I'd stayed with the violin. I played when I was 9. Oh, I'm you know, I want to take piano lessons, but I know I'd be no good." Well, the fact is, society has told us that if you aren't professional caliber or whatever, don't do it. And that's backwards. We need to be able to express everything that we are and have it accepted. That doesn't mean that we don't have controls in terms of quality and, you know, practicing and things like that. But I think we can all do anything we want to do. And I've lived with that. So I don't see limits. I just see possibilities. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it's been answered little by little as we've gone on. So
gotcha. Thank you.
Hey. Well, we're at time, but I will ask if there's one more question that anyone has before. No.
What's for dinner? That's my question.
I'm going to let my toddler usually picks that out these days, so I'm going to ask him when I pick him up. But I'm looking forward to October 30th at the Logan Center in Chicago, because that's when this will be performed, and so I'm very excited for that. And the pieces that have been created by the Honorable Elizabeth A. Baker and Ade Steve Colson will be on that concert as well. We will have another 2 discussions like this with the other 2 music creators. I see Coco is here, and she'll be a part of, I believe, the next one with Elizabeth A. Baker, and then we'll have one in the fall as well. And coming up tomorrow, you get no shortage of seeing my face on your screen if you want to to join us for some conversations that we're having with some local Twin Cities arts leaders, as we think about the importance of community arts organizations and the role that they play in keeping our communities together during trying times, and how they find their way of maintaining the work during this time. So that there's one tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central Time, and then one on Friday. And I think that Laura has included the information in the chat. So please come and join those. At this point, I would really love to thank our panelists, Rudresh Mahanthappa and Renee Baker, for this lovely conversation.
Thanks for having us.
My pleasure.
And obviously thanking Billy Lackey, who runs this program, and all the work that he's put in. The one thing I did forget to say, that this has been a long process, because this was supposed to happen last year. And so we're going into year 3, I think, of this program. So Billy has put in a lot of work, and the AACM has as well, and as well the music creators. So we look forward to showing you the fruits of all of this labor in October. So thank you again. Sign up for the newsletter if you want more information, and be sure to check out our website to stay up to date on things.
Thank you, Dameun.
Thanks,
you
Dameun.
all.
Thanks, Renee.
Thanks, Rudresh. See you soon.
Okay, take care. Have a great summer.
Bye.
Bye.